Hi, my name is Tom Chastain, and this is my racial autobiography. I've always felt shy talking about my own background with students and colleagues. I carry a heavy load of the white man's burden. I'm also a PK, a preacher's kid, so my other burden, I feel, is to care for and help those in need. I've always felt an inner, almost biological drive to do things in life to make up for the failings of my privileged ancestors. Although they weren't Rockefellers, they were pretty waspy and enjoyed things many in the world have dreamed of having access to. I usually jokingly tell people I come from poor white trash, and in a way that's true, but it's a little more complicated. Where should I start? Well, my name is Chastain. My dad is into genealogy, and he's traced our family trees all the way back to Charlemagne. The first Chastain was named Pierre and landed in North America in the mid-1600s as a French Huguenot that fled religious persecution, who probably worked through the Netherlands and Great Britain to make it to what now makes up Virginia. Supposedly, anyone named Chastain in the U.S. today is related to this same guy. My dad's side of the family is pretty much a mix of Western European Protestant types from Great Britain, France, and Germany. My mom's side of the family is a bit more recent in the history of immigration to the U.S. My grandma was Italian and my grandpa Irish, both Roman Catholics. Both my parents' parents went through the Great Depression making do as they could. Although not rich, they did receive educations that many people of color did not receive at the time. I think that led them to produce small families. My dad is an only child, and my mom only has one brother. In the 50s, my parents met at a small liberal arts university in Indiana. My dad was studying to become a minister of the church. Even though their parents were quite conservative, my parents were liberal for the time. Pretty soon after, my two older brothers were born. After finishing seminary school, my dad brought his family back to Indiana and I was born. From stories I've heard, my dad was always proud of being different in a mellow sort of way. I never saw him protest in a demonstration or stand in a picket line, but he used to brag about being on an FBI list because he joined and espoused the NAACP. My mom was a fairly devout liberal and was into the feminist movement in the 70s. Again, I never saw my parents demonstrate or fight for the rights of others, but this ideology was ingrained in me, and I always wanted to be the same. When I started attending school, I lived in a privileged area of Indianapolis. My dad was rector at an Episcopalian church whose parish was pretty well off. A lot of rich white ladies, he used to say. We lived in the rectory house next to the church. I started to realize that my city was largely African American, but extremely segregated. Although the city was trying integration through busing inner-city African American students, only a few sat next to me in my classes. When I was almost 10 years old, I came to realize just how liberal my parents were. My dad came out as a gay man. He was in a relationship with another priest at the church. In my young mind, I always knew this about my dad, but I didn't understand that such a thing was different. My mom was also in a relationship with a woman. The storm caused by my father's public announcement was long and harsh. My dad and his partner were kicked out of the church. This also meant that they were now unemployed. My family was broken apart through the divorce that followed. We lost the church house, of course. My two brothers bore the brunt of the emotional strain. I think I was too worried about how this was affecting them to think about myself. My older brother did the couch tour for the next few years of his life. Nowadays, this would be labeled as homelessness. My brother and I lived with my mother's partner, who turned out to be abusive to her and kicked my middle brother out of the house. I loved everyone in my family for who they were and didn't resent the fact that they were different. Somehow, things eventually calmed down. We all came to accept things in each other and are proud of each other. At holidays, our family is now a lot bigger than before the storm. My dad and his partner have been together now for 38 years, and they exemplify for me the ideals of a committed relationship. My mom and dad are still friends, and she is often at my dad's house for dinners and holidays. I am proud of both my parents for being open and brave. It only took about 30 years for the rest of the country to catch up and start to accept equality in terms of sexual orientation. I was in the closet myself for a long time. I didn't tell any of my friends about this, and I thought I was keeping all a secret. When I finally became comfortable enough with myself, at the age of about 18, I told my friends about my parents. They kind of laughed. They knew all along and accepted the whole thing without a thought. Now that whole experience has led me in large part to want to make up for inequality espoused and engendered by my ancestors. But let's get back to race by going back to about the same time my dad came out as gay. Just a year later, by the 4th grade, I was placed in an enrichment program, which was a little bit like the magnet programs of today. Students were identified by test scores, I think, but there were even fewer black students in my classes at this point. By the time I reached high school, I really noticed the racial inequality surrounding me. By that point, many families in my city were joining the race of white flight out of this core of the city to the townships, ring suburbs around the city. Many of the city's schools closed due to low enrollment, and busing increased. My high school was huge, and I was only one of a few white students at the school, even though the neighborhood was mostly white. I'd say the school was about 90% black. This affected me a lot. I was still in an enrichment program, and the educational experience was good, but I could see the disparity every day. There were maybe 100 students in my cohort, and probably 2 of them were black. I knew this sucked and wasn't right. All of the teachers in my program were white. I think they knew this wasn't right, and I think later on the program was publicly criticized for this. By the time I graduated high school, I was labeled smart and college-bound. But I was pretty radicalized by the humanities-based instruction through 8 years of this program. I was anti-establishment in my personal philosophy. It was 1987, and the height of the age that was Reagan, selfishness, materialism, and MTV. I made it through my first year in college, but I really doubted who I was and why I was going to school. I figured if I got a degree, I would just end up being the man. The one thing I thought was wrong with society at the time. The man was white, Anglo, heterosexual, heterogeneous society that dominated and maintained the inequalities of our country and was imperializing the world for places like Central America and the Middle East, just to name a few. I decided I would drop out of school and just work and be an existential sort of way of living. Why bother learning what the man taught? I didn't want to become the man. So I would just survive and pursue a banal existence of experimentation of being an adult. But I kept getting into trouble. I was a long-haired hippie type, and that didn't go over too well in conservative Indiana. After a few bouts of confrontation with the law for petty things and being evicted because my boss was drunk and disorderly outside my apartment one night, I decided to flee Indiana and head for California, the land of opportunity and better weather. I thought life would improve by moving out of my native environment, but in the long run, the where doesn't change the problem of the who. At the point I reached California, I was pretty poor. I got a night shift retail job that barely paid the bills. I got to know Los Angeles by riding the bus. In those days, it was pretty uncool to walk or take public transportation in LA if you were white. I got to see the amazing diversity that is not white in LA. But soon I realized that smiling at people wasn't cool either, and almost everyone I saw on the bus spoke Spanish. I was pretty bored with being existential, so I decided to go back to school and take Spanish, with no more goal in mind than entertaining my own curiosity. It turned out I was pretty good at it. Eventually I transferred to Cal State LA and got my degree in Spanish. All of my school friends were Hispanic, and I pretty much became a wannabe Hispanic myself. When it came time to do something with my degree, I started as a bilingual TA. Then I eventually got a job as a Spanish and ESL teacher. It's always been surprising to others when they first meet me that I can speak Spanish, let alone teach it to native speakers of the same language. Through my personal history, I have become someone who values being different and the difference of others through the celebration of diversity. I now hope to use the historically unfortunate advantages of my own racial background to correct the burden of being a white, heterosexual man. I hope that by serving low-income, racially diverse students, I can help those students advocate for their own futures and have some impact on the inequality and cultural imperialism that is the history of my ancestors. Thank you.